In September of 2024, Hurricane Helene made landfall in the United States, unleashing extreme winds, deadly storm surge, and numerous tornadoes. The storm, alongside what is known as a Predecessor Rainfall Event, or a PRE, devastated portions of the Southeastern United States and southern Appalachia, with nearly $80 billion of damage in its wake. I'm James Brierton. Welcome to a special edition of the Carolina Weather Group here on location in Asheville, North Carolina, 12 months since Hurricane Helene. We're going to show you some of the damage, not only here in Asheville, but across the region, from both South Carolina and North Carolina, and just hear some of the countless stories that this storm brought to the people of the Carolinas. And we're going to start here in Asheville's River Arts District. For better or for worse, images from here beamed around the country and around the world came to convey what people associate to be the epicenter of Hurricane Helene. Images like these, which show the River Arts District in the immediate aftermath of the storm, when the French Broad River grew to a monstrous size, engulfing entire buildings, carrying away cars, and flooding out the city's entire sewage treatment capabilities. Combined with damage from over 2,000 landslides and debris flows, it would be 53 long days before running water would return. Joining me now, my tour guide, Evan Fisher, who has also been instrumental throughout this process in the last 12 months of helping me and you at home understand what life has been like here in Asheville. You've brought us down here to the River Arts District, the French Broad River right behind us. Very sweet, very calm today, but tell us, what was it like here a year ago?
It was a raging monster here in the River Arts District. You have to go back more than 100 years to 1916 to find an event that was comparable to this in the region. And it is remarkable to stand here on a late summer day, early fall, and see the shallow, calm waters, and to recall what happened just about a year ago.
What has changed over the past 12 months?
Well, it's shocking to imagine the scale of the cleanup that's occurred. It's almost impossible to tell you how much work has been done. And at the same time, it's impossible to tell you how much work is left to be done. And we still see collapsed buildings, yet we don't have mud filling the streets or cars upside down in the ditch. We've come a long way, but there's still a lot of work left to do.
Yeah, the river today, looking at it behind us, maybe a foot or two deep, but 30 times what It is right now.
Yes, absolutely. As we've been walking around today, we can see debris still hanging in the little spots in the trees, just little subtle reminders of the high water marks from Helene.
Talk to us a little bit about the River Arts District, what it was, what it is, and what's to come.
Yeah, so River Arts District has always been a little industrial in nature. There are a lot of warehouses down here, but there's also a lot of space for people to come and be creative. That's why it's the River Arts District. There's a large art scene down here. And throughout the course of Helene, of course, this entire area flooded, and we saw just about every single business down here shut down. Since then, a lot of that has come back in the buildings that are still standing. But of course, as we see around town, there are a lot of buildings that collapsed during that. So there's a lot of rebuilding.
Yeah, we can see from where we stand construction vehicles. We see some collapsed industrial buildings still a year after the storm. Where were you riding out the storm?
I was in East Asheville, really in Black Mountain, a smaller community east of town, pretty close to the Swannanoa River. We were just one row of houses off the Swannanoa. So we had a front row view of all that had happened. About 9 o'clock, really 8 o'clock, everything changed. Water came from every direction and totally overwhelmed our part of Black Mountain. Even as a meteorologist, I still struggle to explain how that happened.
Where internally in this cut-off world did you turn for information?
So we actually had some fantastic town hall meetings in Black Mountain. They were in person. We all gathered in basically the town square, which was a bit of an old school vibe. And then of course, radio was a huge thing. Everyone would sit out in the driveways and we would collect, all circle around one radio and listen.
Yeah, terrestrial radio made quite the comeback. One of the interviews we brought you here on the Carolina Weather Group comes from our Disasters Pod telethon. Got to with other weather podcasts in the aftermath of the storm, and they talked to one of the AM radio stations who were a lifeline to all of those you inside.
As we get emails into the station, people will email us, I'm looking for my grandmother. She's 88 years old. This is her name. This is her address. Here's her phone number, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. Here's our phone number so you can get back in touch with us if you're able to make contact with her. That system has proven to be really a great system. We sent one of our search and rescue and reunification teams a list of 22 people yesterday, and by 7 o'clock last night, he had found 20 of the 22.
Wow.
You know, we took a call live on the air this morning from a gentleman who lived way up on the top of Mount Pisgah, kind of on the back side of the mountain. The flooding from a creek washed away his bridge, which was his only access to the outside world. Both of them were elderly. Both of them had medication. Both of them needed medication. They needed supplies, and they couldn't get anywhere. We called Chris Henderson, who is he's the same one that found the 20 of the 22. I sent him the information. He actually had a nurse who was volunteering with him today. And just after I got off the morning show, I got a voice message from them that they had found this man and his wife. They were doing okay. They've gotten their medication squared out. They've gotten them food. They've gotten them everything that they need. And more importantly, we believe we've got teams en route over there now to hopefully have their bridge reconstructed so that they have access to the outside world.
And for the first time here on CWG, we're going inside NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information here in Asheville. Hear from the scientists who overcame the lack of power, the lack of running water, and the lack of roadway access to now, just 1 year later, publish one of the most comprehensive reports about the storm to date.
I'm Jason Cooper. I'm the archivist at the National Centers for Environmental Information here in Asheville, North Carolina.
My name is Jared Rennie. I am a physical scientist here at NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information.
We are the official archives for NOAA. We also host environmental data records.
So right after Helene came through, I actually was in a parking lot in West Asheville, and it is awkward because I'm one of the people that analyzes floods. So I went to my flood team and I said, well, I guess we have something to look at.
Behind us, we're looking at over 36,000 boxes of environmental data records dating from the 1830s up until the late 2010s. So the records that we have both in paper and microfilm and electronic formats form the basis for environmental research across the globe. This room was very dark during Helene, which did not impact the records, thank goodness. The building lost power for a significant period of time. The primary factor or the primary impact to our records were the digital repository.
We were first told by all of our supervisors, like, take care of yourself. You know, focus on yourself, focus on your family. The work will be here when you get back. Don't worry about it. But then when we started getting our services back and started looking at the data in our building, yes, we did notice that there were disruptions.
The digital server room requires a certain temperature, and when we lose climate control provided by the electricity, we had to find another way to cool that room.
Because of the fact that there was no power for some time, no water for some time, when you don't have those at a data center, you're certainly going to run into some problems. So there were some people that were considered essential that actually came into the building, including some IT professionals and some supervisors, to kind of get a sense of, okay, what can we do to get all these services back up?
And we had to bring in potable water to be able to circulate through the cooling system.
The third floor of this building is nothing but computers. It's basically an Amazon computer farm down there. And when you don't have the ability to cool down those systems, it gets really warm in there. So, and if it gets too warm, then those computers will fail and we'll lose data.
Humidity and climate control in general is always a concern in archives. We lost the building HVAC, which is what largely controls what we're feeling here in this room, for a number of weeks. And thankfully, we're in a basement, which most folks realize the basement is often the coolest part of the house. But for this room, you want to try to find something in the mid-60s with humidities between 30 and 50%. So not too dry and not too moist. The paper responds worse to changes in humidity.
There was actually a time in which the building worked with the City of Asheville's fire department to ship in water from, I believe it was a lake about 2 miles away, and brought it here so that they could pump water into our building to bring all those systems back up. And I believe it was by the end of October, everything was back up and running.
But we did have the natural conditions down here were relatively stable throughout the event. Our digital archives, a little bit different story. It's located on a higher floor here in the building, and the power that's required to run the servers also contributes a significant amount of heat.
Even though it was back up and running, we still had to sort of backfill a lot of the data that came in. Now we have multiple redundant ways of getting data into this building. And a lot of our code bases have the ability to go back in time and kind of retrieve information so that it can go into the proper ingest systems and it can get properly archived. And I believe to this day, most, if not everything, has been mostly restored. I believe by the end of October, 80% of everything was back up. And then, or the data had backfilled up to 80%, and then I think it slowly filtered in.
The government had several factors that it considered when deciding on a location. The first was a place that was relatively immune from natural disasters. That seems ironic now, but a place where hurricanes largely have spun down, tornadoes and earthquakes and wind damage is relatively uncommon here in the Southern Appalachians.
It was hard. It was certainly hard because as a meteorologist, our job here is to look back on events that had happened, not just here in North Carolina, but across the U.S. and world. And unfortunately, there are a lot of disasters out there that lots of bad things happen. So it was hard looking at the data and seeing that. But for me, in the end, it's very therapeutic to talk about it. And we're about at the 1-year anniversary, and I feel that it's really good to talk about it. And the story map, I do think, does a good job at telling the story, but from both a weather perspective, but also a personal perspective. I mean, a lot of the big things we learned was, one, with the rainfall estimates that had happened over that 4-day period, we had about 2,500 square miles of Western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina, and other parts of Virginia and Tennessee experience a 1 in 1,000 rainfall event, meaning that in any given year, the chance of that type of rain is pretty low. It's not zero, but pretty darn low. It was weird seeing, for example, a river gauge that, exceeded levels, 10 feet above its previous record that was set in 2004. And I have a colleague that lives right near that river gauge, and their first floor was basically inundated with water. So it's weird in the end because we're professionals. We look at the science and we look at the data, but at the same time, that data was affecting us.
The proximity to the center of circulation, combined with the mountains of upstate South Carolina and western North Carolina, enhanced the wind threat from Helene. How did we get here? Let's take a look at the path of Hurricane Helene. Not necessarily that we got a more direct impact than Florida, who had it as a Category 4, but when you factor in, and I think this is the heart of the question you were answering with, is that when you couple it with that terrain, it magnifies the impact of the disaster afterwards.
I don't even think that we talked much about the angle of approach. This thing curling northwestward around the upper low. If it had just come up and if it curled to the northeast, let's say, well, then that puts the mountains on the other side of the circulation. That could have changed things quite a bit. But with it curling in the eye of the remnant eye wall, passing off into Tennessee, well, then you're really pushing and accentuating that angle basically perpendicular to the mountain slope, which is the worst thing that you can do because it just amplifies the upward motion.
With hurricane force winds up to 106 miles an hour, that brought down trees and power lines across the region. And it impacted the local National Weather Service office, charged with issuing warnings and alerts across the entire region. You see, they're based in upstate South Carolina in Greenville-Spartanburg, and they too not only were living the storm, but working through it. Spokesperson Tricia Palmer talks about what it was like inside their office.
Trying to message a storm of the magnitude of Helene, when we're talking about a once-in-a-generation event, a once-in-a-lifetime event, whatever wording you want to use, a catastrophic event, is extremely difficult. If you look at the 4-day totals, whether one site got 20 inches of rain or whether a site got 30 inches of rain, it would be different for any individual site. But overall, probably about a third of the rainfall was from the Predecessor Rainfall Event. When Helene came, there was nowhere for the rain to go. We're constantly trying to message to our partners, this is one for the record books. This is the big one. We were telling our emergency managers, we were telling our media partners, and we're having to make those really tough calls to emergency managers. And those were hard conversations to have. The National Weather Service, we don't really have a direct interface with the public like you folks in the media do. Our best way to reach them is via social media. And so we sent it out on Facebook, on X. We need to get this message, this hard-hitting message out to the public. We got comments later from people outside of the Carolinas saying that they saw it and they got scared. And they picked up the phone and called family members. And there was one comment that I won't forget, that this person called a family member in the mountains and read it word for word to this family member. And this family member said, okay, I'll leave. And so the family with 3 kids left. We know that our partners in emergency management, they got no sleep after the event really got going. So we were safe in our little bunker at the National Weather Service. And so our lack of sleep is no big deal compared to what they went through, which was absolutely devastating. Anytime you have a loss of life on your watch, there's always questions that go around in your head. What could we have done differently? What could we have done better? I struggled over the weekend because I knew what our partners were going through. These are their communities. We have first responders out there in the community rescuing people, dealing with loss of life in their families, and there was nothing I could do to help. So that was difficult for us. We had our forecasters, just about everybody lost power for different lengths of time. I lost power for 5 days. Was I prepared for my kids to be out of school for 2 weeks? No. And how do you handle that? I'm driving in, and it took me an hour to get into work, navigating around trees, and then there's a tree that falls down, that I see fall down, and a thought passed through my mind, what am I doing? A tree could fall on my car, and my kids could lose their mom. But my son was, no, we got this. You go help your people. You go help the people here. I got this. I got my little sister. I got this. And I remember looking around at our staff, and we've got some folks who have been there for a long time, close to retirement. And I'm looking at those younger folks. This is the defining moment of their careers. Buncombe County told me that they remembered one of the things that our hydrologist said during a conference call either late Thursday night or early Friday morning was, catastrophic doesn't describe what's about to happen to you. And the emergency manager who told me that said that was earth-shattering for him. It's like, the hydrologist just told us this. What's worse than catastrophic?
Evan, we keep hearing the term PRE, a predecessor rain event. What is that?
Yeah, so these are events that we often see to the north of hurricanes or tropical storms. And last year, that's what we had. We had this upper level system over the eastern United States that drew up moisture from the tropics from Helene into western North Carolina. It's like an atmospheric river, if you've ever heard of that. But it's often what we talk about on the west coast is atmospheric rivers. Over here with the hurricanes, they're predecessor rainfall events.
So days ahead of the hurricane arriving, days before the first drop of rain from Helene, it's raining here.
Absolutely. It poured for 3 days. Yeah.
At what point did you realize that those two things together, the PRE and the hurricane, were going to create the situation that it did?
I think there was great concern even after the first night. We were not supposed to have 6
And the first night being Friday or Wednesday?
It's a great clarifying question.
Helene,
right, Wednesday night.
Okay.
So Wednesday night, we weren't supposed to have more than an inch or two of rain, and suddenly we had 6 or 7, which was fairly unprecedented for Asheville. That was one of those moments where even if it had stopped raining of Thursday, that combined with Helene would have been too much.
Right, because it wasn't until daybreak Friday that Helene's rain and wind were actually arriving here in the Carolinas. Wednesday night, as you know, is our typical podcast night. So Wednesday night we were doing our show, and we were going to be speaking with meteorologists all across the region. Well, I remember pretty clearly, and we'll take a look at the clip here, but we kept losing them to flash flood warnings, but also tornado warnings, because things were ramping up 3 days before Helene arrived. We're taking a live look right now over Asheville. You can see the moisture on the lens. So not only did we lose Brad Panovich to a tornado warning in Watauga County, but we lost Jason Byer to a flash flood warning up there in the mountains. So Tim, to echo your point, it is very much already here and already happening when you consider the predecessor rain event. Just how unprecedented was Helene? And I'm not just using the word unprecedented for fun. It truly was unprecedented. We start thinking about these events and how often or how likely they are to reoccur. Once every 100 years, once every 500 years, once in every 1,000 years. That's how unprecedented Helene was, but it wasn't even just Helene. Those of you watching along eastern North Carolina coast, you might recall we had 2 1 in 1,000 year events in close proximity to each other a year ago. It's the unnamed potential tropical cyclone 8. Is that right, Corey?
That's right. And just keep in mind, these 2 storms happen only about 3 weeks apart. So absolutely remarkable to have 2 events of that magnitude, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 level rainfall in opposite ends of the state. These were not connected events. In some cases, it would be easy to say, well, one event led to heavy rain in this part of the state and then it moved over another part of the state. That wasn't the case here. Potential tropical cyclone 8 was long gone before Helene and its predecessor rainfall moved through. We've had now 9 total storms over the past 25 years that have brought at least 18 inches of rain somewhere in North Carolina. And so even though the data would suggest it's a 1 in 1,000 level event, in all likelihood, it is not that rare of an event. So now we can look at what Helene did and how it compares to events like the flood in 1916. I think the most remarkable comparison is just south of Asheville in Fletcher. This is on the French Broad River as it's running toward the Asheville area. It crested 10 feet higher during Helene than it did back in 1916. Just absolutely amazing to think about a river getting that much further above what was already an extreme record level. Also, I think we don't just have to limit this to Western North Carolina. We can think about Helene's place in all the hurricanes that have affected our state. The only storm I think that really rivals Helene is Florence back in 2018 for a lot of the same reasons, in that Florence was the most extreme event Eastern North Carolina has ever seen. The only other storm in our state's history that produced more than 30 inches of rainfall in parts of the state. I think the widespread scale of both storms also stands out. You think about an event like Tropical Storm Fred in 2021, that was a big event along the Pigeon River and other parts of the mountains, but it was also fairly localized, and that it was only a handful of counties that were seeing those effects. With Helene, we were basically looking at the entire western third of the state getting record rainfall totals, setting record river and flood levels. And again, that's similar to what we saw from Florence. So unfortunately, we already know that the death toll from Helene has surpassed Florence. It's surpassed what we saw from any of those other historical storms, including back in July of 1916. And I saw just today the governor's office has estimated $53 billion in damage in the western part of the state from Helene. So it looks like it will also be, by a pretty good margin, the most damaging and costliest storm in our state's history.
Evan, the water here today, very peaceful. I mean, like, we can hear the white noise that is being made by this very lovely water feature, which draws people to this region. But the force of water is something that was evil during Helene, and probably no more so than what we saw in Lake Lore and in Chimney Rock and in Batcave. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Broad River runs through Hickory Nut Gorge down into Chimney Rock. And in my opinion, even before Helene, that was the scariest river in Western North Carolina. When we have tropical systems, it always floods, and it is very, very intense. During Helene, we saw those rivers rise to unprecedented levels. And of course, now we've seen all of the pictures and videos of the damage there in Hickory Nut Gorge, where the Highway 74A was wiped away, and along with many homes and spots.
It's one of the areas that has not yet fully reopened for business. Chimney Rock having been hit so hard. Before and after satellite images that you shared with us on the Carolina Weather Group showed not only where the water rose up to, but carved away portions of the town.
Absolutely. It's remarkable the force of all of that water that came through there. And I think you will note that there aren't too many videos from when it was happening during Helene. I personally haven't seen many, if any, and that speaks to the violence that was occurring down there. Everyone was fleeing to safety in those moments.
Yeah, this is an area of the Carolinas still being repaired today. Now, we had an opportunity to visit them around the Christmas season when they were doing a market for their small businesses to bring a little cheer, if you will, back to that hard-hit area. Here's some of what we saw.
Yeah, I tell you what, that tour was pretty eye-opening. I kind of knew what to expect, seeing satellite imagery, drone footage beforehand, but seeing it firsthand, it really was more than I even expected. Plus, knowing that, I'd been to this area so many times, it was almost unrecognizable in parts. And there's been a lot of work. You can tell when you could drive through the town, some of the buildings have been cleaned, they've been completely gutted and rebuilt, but then other parts just seems like it's such a long ways away. What really struck me was just the creek and riverbed. The broad riverbed just does not look the same. It was this narrow, babbling river with trees and boulders around it. Now it's this big, gaping, like gravel pit. It just looks unrecognizable from the last time I was here, and really from the times I've been here in the past. And the other thing, my son being with me, he came and he was like, "Dad, I don't even recognize where we're at." He was really like kind of shocked himself, like he couldn't recognize any of these locations. And it does bring me back to the day that the storm, started and we knew it was going to be bad, was starting to see some of these images and pictures coming out of the mountains. And you knew how bad it was, basically because of the rain ahead of time. That rain ahead of time really set the stage for this. And just knowing this area around Chimney Rock, the lake, where it's such a narrow canyon, you've got several tributaries going into there. You just know geologically, geographically, that this is a very flash flood prone area. And in the past that something like this likely happened. You just never expect that you're going to see something this historic in real time, firsthand in your lifetime. So,
Evan, while we were there, we also had an opportunity to talk with the Army Corps of Engineers, who were charged with cleaning the debris out of Lake Lure, because as our viewers and listeners may remember, there was debris not only from Chimney Rock, also Bat Cave, and everything upstream, and they had to get that all out of the river. Here's how they were doing it.
So the ultimate goal is for us to remove all of the floating debris from the lake itself. Anything that was event-related, storm-related debris, to get that removed. So in terms of the operation, what you see behind me is kind of the final destination of a lot of the debris that's been removed. So we've got 3 working barges out on the lake. On those working barges, we have a long-reach excavator. So what they'll do is they'll set up, they'll float, they'll pick up that debris. We also have some floating work barges as well. So they'll pick that debris out of the water. And if we find any other items, as you can see off to the side here, we've got refrigerators, hot water heaters, propane tanks, etc. We'll separate those.
Is there an idea? You mentioned getting the lake and the community back to some semblance of where it was before. Is there a timeline expectation on when that goal might be achieved?
It's going to take a long time, another 6 months plus. But I mean, for us, in terms of what we've contracted with, our contractor here, kind of that period of performance takes us through the end of March or April just for the floating waterway debris. So we estimated about 22,000 cubic yards of debris just within the lake itself. I think now we've removed somewhere between 16 and 17,000 cubic yards so far. A lot of that was in a very concentrated debris field that I think a lot of people may have seen on social media or just some of the reporting early on in the event. We've removed that floating debris field, and now it's just a matter of us being able to get to all these other items that have now kind of washed up to the shore. So it was easy to get that large concentrated pile of debris. Now it's just going to be a little bit slower, a little more methodical, a little more deliberate as we continue to do those collection efforts.
There's a lot to unpack when you think about the social science related to Helene. When we talk about the communication, was it effective, and what words were being used by forecasters and emergency managers to communicate to the public ahead of the storm the magnitude of what was to come?
I honestly thought about some of the maps and graphics and wording I used. I had extreme rainfall in the mountains on Tuesday last week. That's the highest color and wording we use, but in many cases, it wasn't extreme enough. I needed new adjectives or colors. It's just shocking to me that, one of those things, this is the worst thing you're ever going to see. And it's like 10 times worse than that. It's really difficult to explain and put into words. And that's probably the biggest difficulty in meteorology. I think modern meteorology, the science is really sound. The forecasting is really good. The communication of risk is really difficult. It is incredibly hard. It's something that I think we struggle with all the time. And we live in a society where we have optimism bias. We think bad things aren't going to happen to us, even when we know bad things are happening. We also think everything is hype and social media, clickbait, and it's hard to decipher when things are really going to be bad, and they are. But I will tell you, I don't think we're going to have any trouble going forward getting people to take these storms seriously. You talk to anyone in Charlotte after Hugo, you talk to anyone in Southeast Louisiana after Katrina, and now Helene is going to make everybody in the mountains look at hurricanes and tropical storms completely different for generations.
The number of stories across the Carolinas from Helene is countless. And we're trying to get as many of those stories to you as possible, or at least in a way to help paint a picture of what the impact to life across the Carolinas was from the storm. Here's a look at some of the other damage reports and stories that we've captured over the past 12 months. Let's take a look here at some video we got in from our friends at Resort Cams. This was in Boone, where, as you can see, King Street, a very popular tourist destination, became a bit of a waterfall as water came rushing down the street at about 9:30 this morning.
The annex was totally flooded up, but this time it was so high that it broke through the windows and started flooding. Unfortunately, our online store was down for over 2 weeks because Valley Crucis is where all of our central hub was.
The DOT reminding everyone tonight that Western North Carolina, in no uncertain words, is closed. Take a look at this video that the DOT put out. This is Interstate 40 at the North Carolina and Tennessee line. Take a look at this next photo. You can see a whole section of lanes is closed. This is not something some cones and some quickie dry asphalt is going to fix. That is going to take quite a while.
So a couple of the most eye-popping records, you may have heard them already, but if not, 106 miles an hour for the maximum gust on Mount Mitchell, but with sustained hurricane-force winds, which I didn't realize until today's talk.
Yeah, right, I didn't know about that either. I'd heard about the gust, but I had not heard that we saw hurricane-force sustained winds at the top of Mount Mitchell. Now,
we don't have potable or potable water, and we are able to only get water running in some places in the city. So the entire infrastructure, essentially, of the water system has to be rebuilt.
But we did have our fair share of problems. The Congaree River went to major flood stage. The Saluda River did. There was some flash flooding around here. There were plenty of wind damage, too. The Columbia Airport had multiple gusts over 60 miles an hour. But that's nothing compared to areas north and west. The Augusta Airport had 82-mile-an-hour wind gust, for example. And the Columbia Weather Service office, their survey teams, in addition to the tornadoes they've been surveying, they've just been surveying wind damage around the area, too. And they found evidence of wind gusts over 100 miles an hour in the central Savannah River area, at least on the Georgia side of the Savannah River. So
take a look here at Falls Park in Greenville, South Carolina from Jack Kendrick. Yeah, you know the tourist attraction there in downtown Greenville, the nice quaint waterfall. Yeah, looking more again like Niagara Falls and Rapids here because of the intense amount of water that has been flowing. Helene spawned 39 tornadoes, including an EF3 tornado in Nash County, North Carolina. Tornadoes and high winds toppled trees onto homes, killing dozens in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, where some of the most wind-related fatalities were suffered.
We're coming into the small community of Bat Cave, and as you can see, we're getting into an area of pretty heavy destruction right now. This is Reedy Creek on our right, and it's severely scoured out. It's damaged a lot of roadway, but we're almost to a bridge site that is really destroyed, and one of our missions today is to check on this bridge.
I'm happy to say that as of late last night, all the acute care hospitals in the region have had their power restored. and we were able to get power back to Mission Hospital Saturday night.
Greetings. The LGR videos are going to be postponed for a while. You've probably seen. I am finally getting logs and stuff, or trees, full-on trees, taken out of the house now. But
where were you during the storm when this tree came crashing down?
yeah, so the night of September 27th, I was upstairs, just one room over from where those 2 oak trees came through, about 80-foot tall oak trees.
And for everyone who says, why don't people evacuate? Hey, it was a flash flood. By its definition, you didn't know it was happening until it was happening. Okay? It's not like a river flood. Like here in Charlotte, we evacuated Riverside Drive, or a storm surge warning where you have 3 days to get people out of the way. Flash flood warning gets issued when it's flooding.
I visited in Ingalls, actually 2 of them, when I was up there visiting my parents this past weekend, and the one in Columbus had no dairy at all on the shelves. They were just completely cleaned out, except for some milk that they were just putting out, half-gallon containers only.
Here's your graphic, as you mentioned, from September 26th. But
Yeah,
we'll compare this to what ended up happening, right? Because here are the flash flood emergencies, and you can see exactly how they kind of lay right over each other.
I mean, that's wild. You know, the first flash flood emergency I remember in our area was Hurricane Florence, and it was like 1 or 2 counties. We had every single county in our mountain foothills under a flash flood warning for, in some cases, a couple of days.
We need to talk about Queensboro. When you're building your brand, every detail matters, including what you wear. Queensboro Shirt Company makes it easy with easy ordering, free logo setup, and no hidden fees. For more than 40 years, they've helped people and businesses share who they are with the world with their quality embroidery and print. It's all about honest pricing, small business friendly, and genuine care. Plus, their no returns necessary guarantee means that you can try them absolutely risk-free. Go to queensboro.com to see for yourself why they're the top-rated custom logo apparel company on the internet. And you can scan the QR code on your screen right now or click the link in the description to check out the new Carolina Weather Group merch store powered by Wilmington-based Queensboro. You can support the show and support our local Carolina economy when you check out the Carolina Weather Group merch store for hats, shirts, and more. So, Evan, I feel like we talk a lot about the rain and the flooding and the wind, but there is this other tricky element, at least to me, that feels kind of like the Achilles heel, and that was mudslides and landslides. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Yeah, we saw those landslides occur in essentially unprecedented numbers during and following Helene. I think it's one of those hidden dangers in western North Carolina. Well, so many homes and businesses and places that the ground is not necessarily stable when it gets super saturated. And that's what we saw. We saw many homes be unfortunately destroyed and lives taken, a record-breaking number of lives taken by landslides during Helene.
The terrain around here is obviously mountainous and hilly. So even if you didn't live by water and you were maybe safe from the flood threat, that sneaky landslide threat was still present.
Absolutely. There are plenty of places around here where water does not regularly flow, but when the heaviest rains occur, that water rushes into those little gullies, if you will. And those gullies turned into full-fledged rivers and then debris flows and landslides during Helene.
We've got a helicopter passing right now. Probably just a routine aviation flight at this point, but in the aftermath of the storm, that sound, that was a lifeline.
It was, and it was non-stop for 10 to 15 days. It's remarkable how some of these backcountry communities that had no road access for the better part of a month relied entirely on air support for food and drinkable water.
I remember watching it on Flight Tracker, these highways of planes and airplanes that were making it into the lands that had been cut off by the storm. I think this helicopter is passing us now. It looks like some sort of medical helicopter. And you know, we saw the National Guard, we saw the governor and other heads of state fly into Asheville to bring much needed supplies.
Absolutely, those sources were essential. Everything from government aid to even private individuals bringing their helicopters up here. Everyone showed up in those moments when we needed it the most.
The terrain, the landslides, the mudslides. We also heard from power companies the difficulty of getting power restored. It wasn't your run-of-the-mill, we just got to run wires again. The ground was gone.
It was, especially along some of these rivers. And then there were so many, I mean, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of trees down that it took months just to clear the trees, let alone rebuild power supplies.
There was some pretty remarkable video that was shared with us at one point, having to airlift poles into some of these most remote places.
I think, the helicopters are indicative of the situation we're in. We don't have road access back to the park. The only way to put in those large poles and that type of infrastructure is to come in through helicopter. So that's, we're trying to face these challenges as best we can, trying to work through sort of the whatever technology we can to get that done. So that's exciting to see these poles in, and that's sort of a big step. I mean, this is challenging times. We to see places that you are. And I've been with the division for 24 years, so not just the parks, but the communities, to see the impact and to see the lives that not only have been impacted but lost is really tough. And we know these communities are struggling to get back to a sense of normalcy.
Trees that fell onto power lines and roadways across the region have largely been cleaned up, but the threat remains now with all of this dried out timber lying on the ground. We've already seen what thousands of acres burned in Table Rock and the Persimmons Ridge fires looked like in upstate South Carolina, where downed trees enhanced the fire threat by providing those excess fuels. Across the border in North Carolina, an estimated 822,000 acres of timberland damaged by the storm. That enhanced fire threats like the one we saw in McDowell County, where 13,000 acres of timber were damaged, some 520 of them burning during the Buck Creek and Bee Rock fires over the past year. In North Carolina, an estimated 822,000 acres of timber were damaged, and that is what brought fire to Henderson and Polk counties in the months after the storm. All of that downed lumber on the ground becoming a fuel for the storm. But it wasn't just the wind that brought damage to the Carolinas, it was also the flooding. Even beyond here in Asheville, our own Scotty Powell went to his hometown in Burke County, the city of Morganton, where he saw some of that flood damage firsthand.
It was very sombering and very sad to see people's homes who, if you're not familiar with Morganton or Burke County, it's not the most rich area, not the most wealthy area. So these people spent all their lives like buying this home and paying it off, and just like their families growing up there, and all of it gone. And the wave of the lake overflowing and the rivers overflowing, and how quickly that home that they've been in forever was just completely washed away. So that was very sombering and just kind of put into realization of what people were going through. And I don't know if these people ever build back there. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know.
We're not too far right now from the rail yard, and we have seen time and time again how all of that was inundated. Talk to me a little bit about being cut off, right? Because, the railroad got washed out. That impacted the supply chain, but so did roads and surrounding infrastructure.
Yeah, those first 2 or 3 days were truly cut off with very little interstate traffic at all, really just emergency vehicles making it through some of those closed sections. After a week or so, we started seeing a return of regular-ish traffic, but of course the region was still more or less shut down. And then the railroads haven't really come back until this year, maybe 3, 4, 5 months ago, something like that. They started reopening.
Yeah, I think the railroads are just recently getting back up and running.
Yeah, and I don't even know that it's fully connected all the way down to Old Fort. East of Asheville, there are still some sections that I had last seen that were collapsed. So I'd be interested to learn a little bit more about what the status is on that.
Joseph Navin went to Old Fort just after the storm and saw some of those washed out railroads.
So on the way into Old Fort, I was kind of I went through a little bit of the devastation from Merriam area around US 70. And some spot you could not continue on 70. You had to go on 40 to get around to the detour. But the biggest sign of what had happened in Old Fort was driving into, off the exit of I-40. It had mud all over I believe it's at 73. the statistical highway sign had a bunch of mud on, which I felt like was an ominous sign going into Old Fort. I got into Old Fort, and it had been noted that it was a little bit lonely. As part of media, I went through as a freelance photographer. What I saw was a long line going through town. Mill Creek is a creek that goes through town, and it had just overflowed its banks catastrophically during that the flood from Helene. It basically really shocked me as at first was, obviously damage to buildings, but how high the mud must have been after a rain event, because it looked like as if it had snowed, and the snowplow, like we know of, pushes all the snow to the side of the road, but instead of snow, it was mud.
Yeah, if you didn't know any better, coming along this greenway right now, this is a very peaceful, calm, enjoyable place to be. I mean, we keep hearing it, right? Like Western North Carolina is open for business.
It is, yes, it absolutely is. It's amazing how we've sprung back. Excited for the fall leaves in the next few weeks. It's good to be back in the good weather.
For anyone who hasn't been back yet and is wondering if this is a good fall or even a good winter to come back, what's the message?
This is going to be a great year to come visit. We keep telling people that this is a beautiful fall season that we're stepping into. We had a reasonable summer, pretty wet, and now we're moving into a slightly dry fall, which is a great combination for good fall colors. The weather has been brilliant the past few weeks. So just keep telling people to come visit and stay, because places like this are rebuilding and they need that tourism money to recover from the deficit over the last year.
You are the Explore Fall guy. What can we expect for the fall foliage season?
Yeah, I think it's shaping up to be a great season. It's a little bit drier than I'd like to see. I hope we get some rain, but knock on wood, not too much rain. And then I do think by mid-October it's going to be spectacular. River Arch District, Asheville area, generally late October for peak color.
Thanks for joining me for this special edition of the Carolina Weather Group. I'm James Brierton in Asheville, and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 months and beyond after the storm, we're going to continue to keep our finger on the pulse of how the Carolinas is recovering from this historic storm and all of the impacts yet to come. So I hope you will stay with us here in the Carolina Weather Group as we continue to tell those stories. We'll see you again next week for another edition of the Carolina Weather Group. Until then, be well.